What's going on, everybody? My name's Jason. Thanks so much for checking out my channel. Today we're going to tie a UK style buzzer, basically a chironomid pupa. They call them buzzers in the UK. Those of us that fish lakes in North America typically call them chironomids. Those of us that fish rivers in North America typically call them midges. It all means the same thing. Buzzer, chironomid, midge, pupa, they're all the same bug, just by a different name. UK style patterns typically don't have any beads, and that's how we're going to tie this one today. So we've got a Daiichi 1760. This one happens to be one of the Alec Jackson Phantom hooks, which means it's just painted black, basically. I would tie these in 14s, 16s, 18s. Just for the sake of the video, I'm going to do it in a 14. It's a little bit easier to film that way. We will have some UTC 70 Rusty Brown, UTC 70 in black. That spool's getting thin. Some Flex Floss, Span Flex, whatever you want to call it, in white. The same type of material in amber. You can also do orange, yellow, red. The amber is going to be for the cheeks or for the wing buds, basically. Gonna need some white Glow-Brite. And I think, last but not least, a little bit of silver or chrome holographic Flashabou. Let me get my spectacles on here. Let's get this bug started. So we're going to start off with the Rusty Brown. Just get our thread on there. Nip that off, and we're going to go ahead and put our gills on right away. So for the gills, that's what the Glow-Brite's for. I like Glow-Brite for gills for these flies. So we just take a single strand of Glow-Brite and I fold it over on itself twice so that you get basically 4 strands. We're going to tie that on right on top. A couple of loose wraps. And then we will cut that out at an angle. I'm just going to let that hang right there. Next material we're going to tie in is going to be that white Stretch Floss or Span Flex. So again, I'm going to tie that in with a couple loose wraps. I'm going to pull that back a little bit. And once I get that secure, I'm going to give that a good pull. I'm going to pull that nice and tight so we can keep a nice thin body on this fly. You're probably going to see me spin my thread a lot. Go ahead and clip that back out of the way. Nice flat thread. Keep this body nice and skinny. Alright, next material to tie in is going to be the silver holographic Flashabou. Missed it. That's alright. Spin that thread flat and bring that right on back. Flatten that thread right out, and now we want nice touching turns. A little bit different than your typical North American chironomid that's got a bead head. I don't want a lot of taper in this body. And I'll show you why. And you could actually tie a bead head in the same fashion if you wanted to. Right about there is where that thorax is going to start. At this point, I'm going to take a little tiny bit of super glue, whatever your preferred super glue is. Right now I've got a little bit of Zap-A-Gap, and I'm just going to ever so slightly put a tiny bit on there. I find that this helps a lot with the Flashabou. When you wind the Flashabou on, it keeps it in place. And then when you're winding up your Spanflex or Flexi Floss, it doesn't move it around, displace it. So typical chironomid fashion, we're looking for, 7 or 8 segments here. Go ahead and catch that in. Take that off. Give that another wrap or two, and then I'm going to go ahead and whip finish because we're done with this color. This is where black comes in. We're going to build a black head on this fly. So I'm going to go ahead and get my thread started. Cut off your waste. I didn't make a very clean cut there. Spin this thread nice and flat. And take this right back to where we're gonna tie in the Spanflex here. So this can be a little bit tricky. There's not a lot of room here between the thread and the Spanflex. If you're worried about bumping your thread, you can always throw a quick half hitch or a quick whip finish in there. So now we want to stretch this nice and tight on these first couple turns, and that can be just a little bit tricky. I'm thinking that looks pretty okay. We didn't put any taper in the body of this fly with the thread because we're going to taper this body with this rib material as we come up. Just a little bit less and a little bit less pressure on that thread. Or I'm sorry, on that Spanflex, and we get a nice taper effect. A few turns behind. I feel like I'm all fingers on this video. I'm sorry about that. A few turns in front, and we're going to give this a nice, pretty healthy pull. And when we cut it off, that tag end should suck right back into that thread right there. Go ahead and spin our thread counterclockwise to flatten it out. Bring it up towards the head of the fly. Next, we're going to go ahead and throw in our amber or orange or yellow, whatever color you want your cheeks to be. This can be a little bit tricky. We want these guys to start right at the back of that thorax, and what I found is if you turn it over, kind of pull these guys tight, take that right back and then right back forward, that seems to work out pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and keep spinning my thread to flatten it out so we don't get build up where we don't want it. And now we're going to build up a fairly substantial kind of football shaped or cigar shaped head on this fly. I think I'm pretty happy with that. We'll take your side first. Wrap up and over. A couple of relatively loose wraps. We'll take my side. This is the trickiest bit of the whole fly, and I apologize if I'm all fingers right now. So I found that if your Spanflex or whatever you're using kind of crosses over in front like that, you're usually doing pretty okay. So I'm going to take a couple of nice tight wraps now. Pull this back, throw a couple right in the front. And just like the white floss, we're going to pull up on these pretty aggressively and cut them off. Give that bobbin a spin. Right now I'm going to go ahead and cut my gills. I think I'm pretty happy with that. Give it another spin, make it nice and flat, and we will whip finish this fly. I'm only going to give it a 3-turn whip because it's getting UV resin and super glue to finish it. The head of the fly, I'm going to use some thin UV resin. Start off thin, you can always add more. Be very careful to try to keep it off of those gills. Alright, I think that's good enough for the first coat. Let's go ahead and give it a zap. While I'm zapping this, you can see that Glow Brite really pops in the UV. I really like the Glow Brite floss for my gill material. Whether I'm tying a buzzer style like this or tying a regular old beadhead chironomid, I really like the Glow Brite. Now I want a little bit of a bulbous head on this guy, so I'm going to come in here with a little bit more. Kind of give it just that. Just that little bit of bulbous head look there. I think I like that. We'll give it another zap. Alright, you could absolutely use UV resin on the butt or on the body of this fly down here if you want to, but I find that it tends to fill in those ribs. I want those ribs to be pronounced, so I'm just going to use super glue to protect that body. And again, with super glue, a little bit goes a long ways. You don't need much. Go ahead and coat right over the top of your resin too. It'll help it keep that nice, shiny. And that's it. That's your finished fly. The downside to using super glue is you do have to let it dry. But I think for a fly of this style, it works really well. So how would I fish this? I would fish this fly when the fish are in the top couple feet of the water. I probably wouldn't fish this fly under an indicator because it doesn't have much weight to it at all, so it's going to take a long time to sink. This is something I would use fishing naked on a midge tip, or maybe on a washing line setup if you can use multiple flies wherever you're fishing in a buoyant fly on the point, 1 or 2 unweighted flies like this on droppers when fish are taking those emergers or they're eating up high in the water. That's it. I hope you liked it. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. That just makes me feel good. And if you really liked it, hit that subscribe button, and we'll keep this channel growing. Until the next one, tight lines.